What's good, people? Your boy John GK back with another reaction video. Guys, we got something a bit different today. We have Jordan Peterson best comebacks. Those of you that don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's a lecturer, a doctor, I believe. I think he might be a clinical psychologist, I believe, not a doctor, sorry, but they call him like Dr. Peterson and all that kind of stuff. But he knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. So I believe this video will contain some things that may offend some feminists. So because that's what he's about, man. He's a clinical psychologist. He he has these debates with women and, not just women, men as well. And they have these discussions about feminism, about equal rights and all this kind of stuff. So if you do find some of this language and all this kind of, kind of context and, what they're talking about offensive, don't watch the video, guys. But, if you're one of those people that loves hearing a debate, loves to hear, different voices, different opinions and all that kind of stuff, stick around, man, because it's, you're in for a treat here. And you obviously will hear my opinion because that's what I'm about, man. I'm all about my opinion. I love, obviously expressing myself on camera. And if I offend you, I do apologize, but we're all allowed to express our own, our own feelings, thoughts, etc. But yeah, guys, before we start this video, make sure you give it a like. Smash that sub button, hit the notification bell so you're up to date with my latest videos. Guys, without further ado, let's get straight into this video.
The presence of Nazis and white supremacists assaulting people at your protest. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't like Nazis.
And I'm sure, I would hope that if I were a student of Dr. Peterson, that he would refer to me as she and wouldn't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, a personal pronoun preference still is a preference for what language other people use. And at the end of the day, I don't have ultimate control over what Dr. Peterson, what the language he chooses to use, or anybody else for that matters. That's up to them.
Okay, let me find out then.
Arises,
let me find out. If she were a student of yours, what would you call her?
She.
You would. Okay. We've established that.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth.
Guys, we do it all the time, man. Even myself, when I speak on YouTube videos, when I react to videos and stuff, I'm always risking offending someone. And more than enough, man. I'm telling you, someone will get offended in the comment section, or someone will have a dig at me for saying something wrong or having a certain opinion on something. And that's just life. That's just in life. Not everyone's going to agree with what you say. Not everyone's going to, take your opinion to kind of take it into their way of thinking and their processing. It's certain people most people aren't open-minded about discussion. They're not open-minded about other opinions. And I'm very much an open-minded person. I'm more than willing to hear every single person's opinion and everyone out. Because then I might learn something from them that I might have not known, or I might have had a certain opinion something and their opinion might change my view of it. And it's 100% true, man. What Jordan Peterson talks about, he expresses himself quite clearly. We can see that, but within his discussions, he always backs himself up with facts and real data, and that's where you can't play this guy. He's too intelligent for most people. He is too intelligent. He always has his backup data. He always has his evidence of what he says. He's very careful in what he says. And obviously the lady here who's kind of dig a little bit, trying to dig, he has no problem with that. I've never had a problem with people digging, trying to find out a little bit more about what I think of something. And I think that's where all these massive debates and arguments come to. It's bro, it's nothing personal. If you want to find out what's going on, you can dig, you can, try and use things 100%.
Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. And that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
Ha, gotcha.
you have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head.
And there's not a secular humanist organization or country on the planet that has ever produced as a good thing, an intentional good thing, rapists and murderers. So,
well, that's highly debatable. That's highly debatable.
Actually, one of the things absolutely true, because there's never been a secular humanist government on the planet.
I don't know. I think the Soviets were pretty secular.
No,
humanist.
Then,
I know
with all due apologies, you do not know the first thing about what secular humanism is. You should read the secular humanist manifestos, because what happened in Russia and communist countries was an institution of a religious-like structure centered around an individual and forced atheism, none of which is consistent with humanism.
The great American philosopher Beyonce Knowles said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that, have at it, we're all on equal plane.
I think it's fine. I think it's good.
The pot is getting stirred here.
So I've got a couple of questions.
So let's your side spoke, so I'm going to go to Jordan, then to you,
Let's
Michelle.
assume for a moment that I've benefited from my white privilege. Okay, so let's assume that. That's
a good
fine.
Assumption.
That's what you would say. So, so let's say here. Let's get precise about this. Okay.
Was that very individual of you?
Let's get precise about this. Okay.
Let's get precise.
To what degree is my present level of attainment or achievement a consequence of my white privilege? And I don't mean sort of. I mean, do you mean 5%? Do you mean 15%? Do you mean 25%? Do you mean 75%? And what do you propose I do about it? How about a tax? How about a tax that's like specialized for me so that I can account for my damn privilege, so that I can stop hearing about it? Now, let's get precise about one other thing, okay? We'll get precise about one other thing. Now,
Precise.
Yeah, precise, yes. And so, if we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too?
Let me tell you something about this. Like, I think you guys want to hear my opinion about it. Obviously, like, you know, I'm mixed race. You know, my mum was white, my dad's black. You know, and I love having these kind of racial debates with people as well. It's like, okay, there's always going to be a thing called racism. There always will be, because throughout generations, and you can't look at children, and not everyone, you know, everyone that's born isn't a racist, okay? They are taught how to be racist, or there's a certain belief in which they're, you know, I don't know, goes back in their family tree that they have certain beliefs in, you know, I don't know, for example, like the KKK and all that kind of stuff. Like, so kids that are brought up into that kind of environment, you know, they're not born racist, but they become racist. So, but this is obviously like a more kind of simmered down topic. They're not talking about the KKK. They're talking about, I don't know, just like white privilege. Like, oh yeah, you're going to be more successful than someone that's black because of your white privileges. And it's like, to some degree, that is true. Like, to some degree, there can be companies and businesses and people out there that employ white people over not just black people, like any other culture, mixed culture, because the belief is white, you know, not all white people, but education, all that kind of stuff, background, like, and obviously that's not true. That is not true. Like, you will find different ethnic backgrounds that can be more intelligent than white people and all that kind of stuff. Like, and when I mean white people, it's not British, American, like, it's overall, okay? I'm not talking about a particular nation or whatever the case may be. I'm talking about overall, like, and to some degree, like, it's true, but to some degree it isn't. Like, and what Jordan Peterson is spot on about is precise. Like, be precise about what you're saying. It's like, you're saying, yeah, that someone like Jordan Peterson, who has white privileges, yeah, to get into the position he's got to, you know, is down to his color. And it's like, no, that's not true. That's not precise. Like, his intelligence, his educational background, his beliefs, the way, you know, his, I don't know, day-to-day goals and whatever he done to become this clinical psychologist and this person, you know, who can debate all over the world and all this stuff. Like, that is not down to him being white. That is not. That is definitely not down to him being white. Like, and it's the same with that black guy. Like, the black guy, I'm not too sure who he is, but listen, I'm telling you something now. He would not be sitting there in that chair if it came down to white privilege, if it came down to race. Don't get me wrong, like, 100 years ago, like, things were a little bit different. In this day and age, there is no way, if you're white, black, Asian, doesn't matter what race you are, there's no way you can come to the stage and say, I haven't got here because of my privileges. It's complete rubbish. Like, you get to where you want to get to through your mindset, through your education, not always education, but, you know, how highly educated you are in a certain subject. Like, it's down to you. Like, it's not down to race and color. Don't get me wrong. It can have some effects. It can have some plays. You might not get that job because you're perceived in a certain way. And don't get me wrong. There are people out there that perceive you and judge you. They judge a book by its cover. I 100% get that. But like he said, be precise on what you're saying, mate. Like, and I agree with Jordan Peterson on this one, because he ain't being precise about it. It's like, maybe like 1% is white privilege. Like, apart from that, he went to university, he studied, he worked his ass off to get in the position he got to, and that's not down to him being white. He could have been black and he could have done the same thing. So let's continue with it. That's my point.
Too far. You didn't like equity, equality of outcome. I think that's a great marker. But if you have a better suggestion and won't sidestep the question, so let's figure out how I can dispense with my white privilege, and so that you can tell me when the left has gone too far, since they clearly can. And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. Yeah. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when, so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
When you talk about, feminizing men, it almost sounds derogatory. It's almost as if you're saying that to be feminine or to express any sort of femininity is actually inferior to masculinity. And I think that is a huge problem even within the language that we use. When you say, don't be such a girl, don't be such a pussy, the greatest insults that men can...
Bro, I don't know, I have never heard the saying, don't be such a girl. Never heard that. And when you say, don't be such a pussy, that is not inflicted on being a woman. Like, that doesn't, if you were to call someone a pussy, that just means you're scared. It doesn't mean, oh, you're a girl. Like, that's completely wrong.
Give each other tend to have feminine origins, like, as I said, pussy or faggot.
Pussy has never been... In my meaning of a pussy, it's never been, the clinical term of a vagina. Like, it's never been kind of compared to that. Calling someone a pussy, it's always been like, you're a wimp. And that's got nothing to do with being a girl. That's completely wrong. She's taken that
or anything like that. And I think, again, that speaks to a very systematic inequality between the genders. And
you attributed the rates of mental illness among men to their inability to express, say, sentimental emotions. Well, and I don't think there's a shred of clinical evidence to support that stance. I don't think there's a shred of evidence to support that stance. The kind of violence, for example, that Lawrence is discussing is a consequence of competitive violence among young men as they move
I think there is some evidence that men find it difficult to talk about things, and that
and they also
ways in which you can help young men to talk about things.
And that's the evidence for the differential rates of mental health suffering.
I also don't think when you're talking about things being so innate, Judith Butler would have said that, gender is a construct, that gender is a performance.
Well, Judith Butler doesn't know what she's talking about in the least, so I don't accept that.
That's interesting, but
she's no scientist, she doesn't know the psychological literature.
And this is all under the influence, you say, of postmodernism and neo-Marxism.
Yeah,
but aren't those things two separate things?
They're completely separate. And this is something I've been criticized for. Dr. Peterson doesn't understand the difference between neo-Marxism and postmodernism. It's like, I understand the difference perfectly well. It isn't me that's conflating them. it turns out that the people who push postmodern doctrines in the university almost always ally themselves with a Marxist viewpoint. And that is logically incoherent. But I would say the postmodernists really don't give a damn for logical coherence because they regard that as part of the oppressive, patriarchal, Eurocentric view of the world. The idea that there's an objective reality and all of that, and that you can deal with it with logic.
You accept this oppression narrative without question. You know, 120 years ago...
I don't accept anything without question. I'm just telling you a fact.
That's not a fact.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Women were expected to stay home and take care of the kids and cook a meal. That's a
Women didn't have reliable birth control until 1960. You know, don't you think that played a role? Don't you think the fact that they didn't have reliable care for
Are you
their
blaming women
cycles,
for not being allowed to lead countries, to lead nations? Because they didn't
They were allowed to lead nations. There were queens in many countries. I think you have no idea how much this oppression narrative has saturated your thinking.
Why do you think it is that so much of what you say is so very popular with the alt-right?
It isn't. And you don't have any evidence for that at all. Any more than the evidence that alt-right people...
This is what I'm saying, man. People always succumb to judgment. Like, a lot of these politically debatable people, they come on these shows and have all these debates and, they all know their stuff, like 100%. But it's like, they never back themselves up with evidence. Like I'm not saying Jordan Peterson's the only one that does it, but for me, I've watched this guy and he always backs himself up with evidence. And scientifically, him being a clinical psychologist, that helps him a greater deal than someone who, isn't a scientist and clinical, into that kind of, they're not in that kind of sector. Because when you've got evidence to back it up and you've got facts, you've got, scientific proof, you can't go against scientific proof. You just can't. There's no argument against that. So, it's a hard one. It's a hard one because sometimes you're like, you want them to be right, but it's like, if you've got no hard evidence, then how are you meant to back yourself?
Daily Stormer, Neonite website, Saviour of Western Civilization.
Oh, well, that was all taken apart today by a number of Jewish publications, by the way, showing that, first of all, that was all satirical commentary on the part of the alt-right, directed at taking me down, for example. And there was an alt-right article yesterday published saying that I was a Jewish stooge and shill. So this is absolute nonsense, and I don't appeal primarily to the alt-right. There's no evidence for that at all. It's the proclivity of...
I never said primarily, Jordan. What I'm interested in is why you think that you get the reaction that you do from the alt-right. Looking at the Cathy Newman documentary,
what reaction?
Interview.
There's 10 million people watched that and commented on it.
I'm talking about what I saw, and I'm curious to know what your reaction was to the glee with which the alt-right seized upon that interview.
I don't accept. Should we deal with the death threats? I mean, she had, I think, a dozen.
I don't accept the concept that it was the alt-right that was doing this. There were 10 million people who commented on that video, and about 95% of them commented negatively on Cathy Newman's behavior. You think there's 10 million alt-right trolls watching that? I see very little of the pursuit of justice characterizing the modern university. I see a tremendous amount of the pursuit of vengeance for things that don't even deserve to have vengeance extracted for them.
So give me an example of what doesn't deserve vengeance.
How about the existence of the patriarchy?
But you don't mean now that women have not suffered injustices. In Britain, Virginia Woolf couldn't go to university, or rather she couldn't get a degree. Women have been excluded in all kinds of ways from social situations, have they not?
Yes, but people have been excluded from social situations in all kinds of ways. And I don't like the narrative, the social historical injustice narrative as a way of looking at the world. The way that young people now are taught about the relationships between men and women throughout history is that the fundamental narrative is that men oppressed women throughout the course of history. And then that kind of came to an end when everybody woke up in 1964.
No.
Yeah, really, that's really it.
No, listen, I don't know what it's like in Canadian universities, but that's what I call, and forgive this European reference, that's a kind of Punch and Judy way of seeing it. That is not how universities as a whole operate.
Well, that's how they operate in Canada. We had the biggest scandal in Canadian university history last year when a graduate student was hauled in front of a Maoist inquisition for daring to show a 5-minute video of me discussing issues like this on public television. Universities are in far worse shape. Maybe they're not in such bad shape in the UK as they are in in North America, but they're in plenty bad shape in North America.
Forgive me, and I'm sorry you were involved, but that is not the biggest scandal. The biggest scandal will be the number, for instance, of suicides that are prevalent amongst undergraduates. The fact that one academic was hauled up, in my view, inappropriately for doing what was done is not the biggest scandal. You're inflating
It's
things.
not the biggest tragedy.
But
the
it's the
suicides
biggest
are a bigger tragedy, but it was certainly the biggest scandal. Canadian universities don't make international news.
Your background.
Damn.
It's pretty...
That's what I mean. It's different. It's different for Canada, man. Canada obviously seems to be... The universities are, you know, it's a massive scandal over there. I don't know if it's still like that now. But, you know, in the UK, for example, it's completely different, like talking about that kind of scandal, like it's completely different over in the UK. You know, a lot of the time, a lot of the discussion in news and universities and stuff is about, undergrad, graduates' depression and, it's not too much about equality now, like in the UK. It's more about, it is about like suicide rate and mental health and all that. So, politically it's completely different. So, it's hard to agree with everything that Jordan Peterson says because it's completely different over here in the UK, for example, as it is in Canada and North America. So, it's hard to have that debate, but I think he's completely right in what he's saying. If I was to go over to Canada and actually really sit down and see what the university systems are going through and all that kind of stuff, I'll probably open my eyes a bit. It would open my eyes and a lot of people's eyes and views that are from the UK and other countries, and they probably would open their eyes more to Jordan Peterson's, his point of view and what he's saying. So, yeah.
Pretty earthy. But how did you connect that with your current political perspective? What you said that you became disillusioned with socialism.
I became disillusioned with ideology.
With ideology in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's certainly not something that's changed. I mean, I don't like ideologues.
Well, guys, that was Jordan Peterson's best comebacks. My point of view is intelligent guy, man. He always backs himself up. He always has proof or at least evidence to back himself, scientific evidence, to back himself and his point of views. And you can't go against that. You cannot argue against that. If you have no scientific proof or evidence that states what you're actually arguing and debating about, you don't have nothing to back that up in, like, I don't know, like you might have some like kind of stats, then, it's very hard to argue against someone like that. And he's a clinical psychologist. He knows what he's talking about. He's not, he's educated in that subject. When it comes to like feminism and kind of like how, men, were the ones that oppress women and all that kind of stuff, like there is some truth to it, man. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, only 40, 50 years ago, like, you really did start to see like equality almost, like, with women being able to do the same, like with universities and all that kind of stuff, like women being able to get a degree, jobs. And it's like, but then you got on the other hand, it's hard because it's like, what do you expect men to do? Do you really think that was the man's problem? Like, do you really think it was men that oppressed women? Like, and it's not all men, don't get me wrong, like, and the way of like how nature kind of, how nature calls, it was like the women would stay at home, they would look after the children, and that's not because men wanted them to do that. It was because, the women had the children, she gave birth, that was her process, that was her nature, and it was like, well, I'm sure enough, if you, like, for example, like, if I had children and then my wife asked me to stay at home with the kids, I would do it. I'm pretty sure most men would do it. Like, I don't think it's this big thing. I think it's a very inflated thing that men would not do that kind of thing, and men would kind of keep women oppressed and, no, you're staying at home, you're cooking. Like, I personally think, like, in this day and age, like, that is completely gone out the window now. Like, looking back in, like, and he made a point, when was it, about the pill or something like that, like they didn't have it's something to do with all of that pregnancy stuff, but it's like, it becomes, that's where the debate happens. It becomes hard to say that men did actually oppress women in that kind of way or form, and it's like, well, what do you expect us to do? Like, do you just want us to stay at home as well? Like, it always can't, you know, there's always something to argue against it. So that's why, you know, these guys are at the top of their game when it comes to debates, man. I could not do it, because there's always a counter argument. There's always something to, you know, counter that. And that's where the debate just goes on and on and on, and it becomes never ending. You know, it's always going to be a never ending factor. But guys, let me know your comments, man. Let me know your views and opinions on what you think about feminism and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear it, man. Like I said, like, I'll give my own opinions, and listen, I'm not afraid to take the heat. I'm not afraid to, you know, get, you know, people to go against me and all that kind of stuff. Like, I've had it on my other videos where I've had expressed my own feelings and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, not everyone's going to agree with you, what you say, man. And like Jordan Peterson said in one of those videos, like, you're always taking that risk factor when you're thinking on what you have to say. Like, and even like with some of the music videos I react to, like, I have to really think carefully. Otherwise, if I say the wrong thing, boom, like, I'm gonna get hate. Like, it's just gonna happen. But even when I've said the right thing, I still get hate. So you're not gonna win. But guys, it was, you know, a very long video, but I enjoyed that very much, man. Very entertaining. I'm definitely going to be doing more videos like this, 100%. Maybe another Jordan Peterson video, who knows? But let me know in the comment section what you think. Guys, you here with your boy, Jordan GK, and I will see you in the next video.